Hey friends, I recently finally read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and I have to say that this is definitely a book you should read if you are trying to get into classics, if you are going through one of those 100 best books of all time lists. This is a book that's quite easy to read, it's quite short. I found the language approachable even if you are not a native English speaker. The book is obviously very dark. You know the plot. I don't think I can spoil it at this point, it's been 200 years. The scientist by the name of Victor Frankenstein creates this monster in his lab, not actually a lab, in his dorm room. Then he brings life into this monster, and the rest of the book is what happens afterwards. The book is dark, the creation story of it is also quite spooky. Mary Shelley with Percy Shelley were gathered in the house of Lord Byron in Switzerland, where most of the book is set, and Byron challenged the guests to come up with a super scary story, and Mary Shelley had a vivid dream about the scientist who creates a monster. Mary Shelley's life was full of drama and loss and death and suffering, so I think a lot of the impact of her own personal trauma can be seen in this book. The book is told from a perspective of several characters. A very fascinating part is told from the point of view of the monster. It's a very unusual piece of writing to go through because you can see in real time how somebody goes from just being, let's say, born or created and trying to get to understand what the world is, and then growing up mentally and asking themselves questions like, who am I, what am I doing here, why am I so different from others, why am I alone, and then really wanting to be liked and accepted, and then ultimately being thrown out of society and not accepted at all because of how different they were from everybody else. So this lack of acceptance leads to them becoming a villain. Part of the narration of the book is done from the point of view of Victor Frankenstein, where his biggest struggle is actually trying to understand whether he had the right to create life. The rest of the book is him suffering the consequences of his God complex and his decision to create life out of nothing. Outside of the obvious questions of life, God, and what does it mean to be human, what does it mean to be alive, which are all questions that are still very relevant, right? So we still talk about what is life, when does life begin. At the time, a big question was actually, when does life end? You might have heard about galvanism and different experiments that were quite popular in the 19th century Europe, where scientists were conducting experiments to try to revive dead people, or they would be putting electrical currents through body parts of animals to see them move. And the whole idea was at that time that perhaps the body is just a collection of machines working together, and as long as they work together and you put an electrical current through them and the heart is like a pump, you can actually bring life back. A big topic back then was, when is somebody actually dead? You might have heard about the bells that were put above the coffins on the graves, right? The whole topic of life and death and where the line was and what does it actually mean to be alive was very relevant for Mary Shelley. You have to also understand that at the time when the novel was written, the topic of reviving dead matter was not as ludicrous as it might seem right now. To the people living at that time, the book would have seemed much more scary than to us, because it seemed like this would be the next step in the scientific progress. So I do recommend you read this book, not just for the plot or for the characters in it, although both the plot and the characters are really interesting, but I would also recommend you do some research around the historical period, about the scientific experiments run at the time, and just about the whole context of when the book was written. This is generally what I think is a really good approach when you read classics that are older, where you don't really understand the historical period or the culture or the customs of the time. This will make your experience so much richer and so much more enjoyable. I hope you like the book. Let me know in the comments what you think, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.